All right, you guys liked my story about DC Stevenson and Madge Oberholzer in Irvington and that kind of true crime pathway. But those of you who, if you already know, you know, but if you don't know, this is the dwelling of serial killer H.H. Holmes, who they're starting to investigate and think he might actually be Jack the Ripper. You ready to get into it? I am not sharing the address. However, if you are in the Irvington area in Indianapolis, Indiana, there is a haunted ghost tour every year for Halloween. And they do pass by the house in the middle of the night to tell the story. So if you are in the area, make sure you get your tickets so you can hear all the spooky stories about the neighborhood. But let's get into H.H. Holmes. All right, so we're going to get into... For those of you that already know, there's a book out called Devil in the White City. There was chatter at one point about somebody like Leonardo DiCaprio or Johnny Depp or somebody coming to do a movie of that. I don't know if that ever happened. But those of you that don't know the story of H.H. Holmes, I'm going to kind of give you the Cliff Notes version because it's deep. So H.H. Holmes graduated from the University of Michigan. At the University of Michigan, he studied a lot of biology and stuff, a lot of physical anatomy, but everyone knew him as a swindler. He committed insurance fraud, he stole people's horses, he actually married multiple women without telling them, so he had multiple wives, so he just sucked already from the beginning. Eventually, H.H. Holmes went on to sell the skeletons to colleges. So when you go to college and you'd study anatomy, he would provide the skeletons. And a lot of people just figured he was probably either digging them up from graveyards or whatever. And he had an accomplice that helped him get away with whatever he was doing. Nobody really knew. They just knew, okay, he's got skeletons, we need them, we'll just buy them. H.H. Holmes eventually went to Chicago, and he worked for a drugstore or grocery store that eventually he worked so hard, and the lady that was there was like, oh, he's such a good employee, I'll let him buy the store for me. H.H. Holmes buys the store and decides to turn it into a hotel. He keeps this hotel alive by selling these skeletons. This hotel turned into what is now known in Chicago as the Murder Castle. When I tell you, you have to look up everything that happened in that hotel. It is so dark. He created almost like a fun house of horrors. What he did was he made trapdoors in the floors, in the walls, and each door led to someone's demise. For instance, one of them had a trapdoor that when you fell through it, you went into a vat of something that literally boiled you alive. So random torture devices kind of all throughout this murder castle, which now we know that's where all the skeletons were coming from. H.H. Holmes also, people started noticing that things were weird around the hotel. People were starting to show up missing. The accounts, this is where it gets crazy. H.H. Holmes admits to killing like 27 people, but folklore says it was probably closer to around 200 people. And this is based on how many skeletons he sold to the college, like a combination. But here's where Irvington comes in. So eventually people are starting to catch on, things are getting a little weird, and he's like, I think they're catching on to me. So H.H. Holmes decides it's probably time to move. And this is where he ends up in Indiana, specifically in the Irvington neighborhood that I always show you guys on TikTok. Here, everyone is completely unsuspecting. They just recognize him as being an upstanding citizen. He's so nice. And at that time, he befriends a woman who needs a little extra help, and she trusts him with her children. And of course, the children are not safe, and the children end up being buried under his front porch. Again, you need to Google how all that happened. I can't go into all the details on TikTok because then I'll get shadow banned or whatever. So now he's kind of crossed the line, right? Because now we have children that are missing in his presence. People in Chicago are looking for him now. He's got more people on his tail than ever. And this is where the Jack the Ripper comes in. H.H. Holmes decides to go to Europe and is like, I need to take a sabbatical. I'm just gonna get out of here because things are getting a little uncomfortable for myself. So he decides to take off to Europe. And wouldn't you know that the same time period that there are accounts of H.H. Holmes being in Europe are the same time periods that everyone found out about Jack the Ripper. And let's not forget, H.H. Holmes has a history of anatomy. He has a history of being able to strip down people to bone. He has connections with the medical industry. And about the same time that H.H. Holmes decides to flee and go back to the Americas, the murders in Europe stop. Either way, eventually H.H. Holmes gets caught, and he is executed at the age of 34. If that tells you, like, he did a lot in his very young life. The brokerage that I used to work for when I was a baby agent had the excitement of listing that house from an owner, and she swears that the house was haunted, like absolutely 100% swears. Then the second set of owners came through, and they were like, we don't believe in ghosts, we don't see anything, we don't hear anything, we don't think there's such a thing. And now there is a third owner, since at least I've been in the neighborhood, who I don't know what they think. So nobody has really had the chance to ask him what he thinks of the house. And I don't even know if he knows. So, but the owners of the home that didn't believe in ghosts and were like, this house is not haunted, had, what was the name of the show? It was one of those history shows. I can't, my brain is literally, it's not a TLC, it's not HGTV. Anyway, it was like on the History Channel. It was one of those paranormal groups that came through. They did a study of the earth to see if there were any like bones that they could excavate, or see if there was anything still on the property from H.H. Holmes. And wouldn't you know, they did a little ultrasound of the ground and found that there were still remnants of bones in their yard. I know that episode exists out there, so I wish I could tell you what you're just gonna have to Google. Again, I'm sorry I keep like making you guys go back to Google to do that, but I only have so much information up here. But anyway, that is my second spooky story about the Irvington neighborhood, and that's like the best one of all of them, of course, because H.H. Holmes, I feel like everybody knows who that is. Like, if you're just now listening to this story and you're completely shocked and have never heard of H.H. Holmes and his hotel and like the castle and all the crazy stuff that was happening there that he was doing, you definitely need to go look it up because it's nuts. So yeah, that's the story, and that's the house, and that's the neighborhood. My next story I think I'm gonna give you guys is how John Dillinger came through Irvington and what happened with that. So stay tuned for my next TikTok about that. And no, I'm not turning my TikTok into like true crime podcast thing. I just figure as we approach spooky season and all the stories that we're gonna, whatever, I just figured it would be fun to do something different for once about all the history. Okay, bye.